College Station, and in let's see, what's her name? In Boykin.
Right.
She prepared this.
Yes, you know, I've seen some of these.
And this was from a picture that my brother found out. I was in Fort Meade, and he came down, and my captain gave me a weekend off, and we took a picture made and sent to our mother.
This is your half-brother? That's
my half-brother. His name is Lloyd Dupree.
Is he still living?
Oh no, he died in 79, I think, or 78. 78. He was. This is not me. This is a picture Ann found just to show how we. And that's about the way we were heavily loaded. And this is not. I mean, this is just some pictures she got in for the effect. But this picture was one was made when I was in England, just before D-Day. And this is one at A&M in '42.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And then, that's the one that.
That the Bill used on the thing here. Yeah, that's the same one.
Then they took a picture of me.
And they took a picture of you. Yeah, that's right. Well, I read this story. It's just an incredible story. You were at Texas A&M. You were at the movie theater when Pearl Harbor was attacked, right?
Yeah, that was really, I'm sure you know about A&M and its past history.
Yes, sir.
We had the largest enrollment when I was a freshman, 1940, the fall of 40, we had 6,000.
Yes.
Of course, it's all cadets. And A&M was running more like an army post than a college then. We didn't have cars.
Yes.
And we didn't have much to do. We went classes till noon, and then they either had us drill or ride over horses, or we'd go to the movie.
Right.
And they expected us to go to church, too. We didn't always go. But they didn't have such a clamp on religion back then. In fact, we were asked to identify what religion we chose.
Right.
I don't remember anybody coming by and recruiting us, but most of us were in the habit of going to church. I had read something quite a few years ago that the greatest church per capita attendance in the United States was during the Depression.
Yes.
And then World War II, because the Depression, they didn't have much to do. Everything was closed on Sundays, and church was a big social event.
You bet.
And it was a big impression on most of us, and I think very useful in the war. And then the war was kind of religiously oriented too. President Roosevelt prayed for the nation, prayed for the on the radio, and King George in England did too. And so I think maybe we were fortunate in that way.
Yeah.
We were.
Obviously your faith was very important to you.
Yeah, I think, and in danger we seem to turn to prayer mentally or verbally.
Right. So you joined up, or did you join up, or were you drafted?
Pearl Harbor, they told us stay in school, at A&M especially, and I guess maybe other schools.
Until you were needed?
I became restless because it looked like we were winning the war, and I had already had two high school classmates killed, one in Italy and one over in the Pacific.
Yes, sir.
And had almost everybody I knew. Not everybody went to college then, and we had so many join up right at Pearl Harbor, and I kept thinking I was going to miss that war. But they put us on I guess, semi-active duty. We were in ROTC,
Right.
and we got all Army equipment and uniforms, though we had our own private. And we had cadre officers and regular non-coms that came to work with us in 43. This happened in 43.
Yes, sir.
And I heard that if you failed your grades, we knew if we failed the grades, something would happen. And or if we got in trouble or something, we might go on active duty immediately. And then somebody said, "Well, if you resign, you'll go on active duty." So I didn't tell anybody. I just went and resigned at the registrar's office. And the next morning, that we were over in Sabisa Hall. Then I started out over in Duncan Hall dining room, the 12 dorms when we started, and Sergeant Sabo, he's a regular Army sergeant, came up to me and said, "What have you done?" And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You got to be at Fort Sam Houston in 24 hours." And so I was in the Army then, and I think I said in some of these interviews I had seen a short subject. They used to have little news and short subjects and little comedies and things before the main feature. I don't think you remember.
Right.
And they had one on Fort Benning paratroopers, and I got real interested in it and read about it. And I tried to get in, but they required me to go to basic, and then they tried to reroute me because I'd had so much college. I'd had what amounted to 3 years, and I could have gone to pilot training without the 6 months pre-flight. And I had a lot of pressure put on me to stay in the training cadre or to go to OCS, and I had this wild hair, I guess, and I finally they finally let me join the paratroopers. I went to Fort Benning.
You went to jump school there? You went to jump school at Fort Benning?
That was Fort Benning, yeah.
Right.
I got permission, and funny thing about the paratroopers, you could join. It was supposed to be the only way you get in is volunteer. But once you got in, the preliminary training prior to the jump school, they called it, prior to the parachute school proper, which is a 4 weeks course then, they tried to make you quit. Because it was attractive. It was new. They had special uniforms that like very similar to what people are wearing now, all kind of pockets and everything, and boots, first boots ever worn. Everybody else had brogan shoes and leggings. And if you qualified, you drew $50 a month, what they call jump pay. We call jump pay, but it was hazardous duty pay, and that was officers on down to privates. And that's a lot of money, because the regular common soldier private was making $21 a month, and so $50 just attracted worlds of people. Well, they had what I would call a Junction, Texas Bear Bryant way of getting rid of it. They took away all our clothes, took our money, and gave us a pair of coveralls, nothing else, and shoes, and put us in tar paper shacks over across the Chattahoochee River in Alabama, and ran our heads off night and day. We fell out. Sorriest food, couldn't leave the area, and severe type of physical training, terribly severe. And it was about, I believe Bear Bryant must have heard about it. They called it the paratrooper frying pan. And they lost a lot of guys because they say, like this, go down and we call it a quit slip, but it was a request for a transfer. And we won't send you back to where you come. It won't embarrass you. They encourage you to quit. I guess they didn't want to invest those 4 weeks and a lot of time and a lot of money, and then people quit before they jumped.
Right.
I'm talking too much.
No, you're just doing fine. But you were eventually assigned to the 82nd, but you joined them in England.
When we finished the parachute school, we got wings. That was another thing. Common soldiers, didn't have to be a pilot or anything. I thought I'd show you one. I have these, my original graduation wings. They were sterling silver, and now they've got little clips pins that clip on, but those pinned on just like a safety pin.
Yes, sir.
And we were very proud of them. And
you bet.
And for a common soldier, it was a great thing. And I was a private. I was supposed to have been an officer, and I'm a kind of an embarrassment to A&M, really, because we turned out officers. Afterwards, we turned out lots of officers, I think, in World War II, more than any other one place. Have you ever heard that?
Right. Yes, sir.
So I was a black sheep there. But this was something that you get in your mind, and it's a challenge, and you want to do it. When you finish, we had a chance to go to schools, communication schools, medic, become a medic, you could become a sapper, explosive expert, you go to ranger school, you could do a lot of things. But I found out you could volunteer for overseas replacement. Mm-hmm. And that's the quickest way to hopefully get into combat, get in the war. And I did. And so I got sent to a place in North Carolina near Charlotte, Camp McCall, which was called a paratrooper pool. It was where you were waiting to be assigned and so forth. And then a whole bunch of us went over as replacements to the 82nd Division, which was the first real tactical division of paratroopers and glider troops, airborne troops. And they had trained in North Africa, had been July 9th, they went night invasion of Sicily, airborne invasion, the first huge American airborne assault. And then they, after Sicily fell, they went back to North Africa, and then they were used to reinforce Mark Clark's Second Army, and was considered as saving a disastrous situation over at Salerno, jumped at Salerno at night. And they fought in the Italian line, main line, all the way up to Naples. They were taken out. Part of the division was used in a seaborne assault on Angel Beachhead. Mm-hmm. And then part of the division was brought up to England, and then later that other part was brought up to England. And I went over in February of '44, the largest convoy that ever crossed the Atlantic. And the flagship of the convoy was the battleship Nevada, which I thought my half-brother was on. But he had been transferred to a minesweeper after he got back to Boston. And we went over. There were two regiments already organized that went over with us, 507th, 508th, that went to the 82nd for the invasion. And then there were a lot of replacements, and then the 101st had gone over about then. Mm-hmm. I've forgotten exactly when, but anyway, we got to Ireland. They put us up in a camp overlooking Belfast Bay, and there's the battleship Nevada sitting in the middle of it. And I tried to get there. Of course, my brother wasn't on it. I didn't know it. Mm-hmm. And then they took us on seagoing ferries over to Scotland. And Scotland, we were bivouacked, and then later taken down by train to the what they call the middle of England, the Midlands, and that's where the troop carriers were, and where the airborne 101st and 82nd were both in that general area, and trained real hard, and we were involved in the D-Day assault the night before the beach assault.
It says that you actually took off about 10 o'clock.
Yeah, I remembered it sometime.
The night before D-Day.
Yeah.
And you jumped behind the German lines?
Oh, yes.
While the beach invasion was going on?
Yeah, they were, I think they went in around daylight.
Right.
There were 4 American divisions, 2 American divisions, 1 British and 1 Canadian on those 4 beaches.
Right.
And the Canadian had a airborne division that jumped behind the beaches, and the British had one behind a beach, and then 101st dropped behind Omaha Beach. We dropped behind Utah Beach. The airborne assault left England and flew south and turned, and didn't know this at the time, and turned and came in over the western shore of the Normandy Peninsula. They called it the Cotentin Peninsula, where Cherbourg was up. And then they dropped us in. In other words, we didn't fly over the land and beach assaults. We came in from the southwest.
Yes.
And most of that I wasn't aware of at the time. They did tell us what our objectives were. It looked real bad. The Germans had so much armored reserve that most of the experienced soldiers felt like we would probably get annihilated. And the British high officers was against the airborne assault. They felt like that Germany was too powerful. But Eisenhower ruled to do it, and he said later it made a lot of difference.
Now, when you landed, I know you said that your unit landed pretty much everywhere. Where did you land?
Our division objective was a small town called St. Mary Église, and it was a hub of roads and things leading up to the beaches. And our 3rd Battalion was supposed to take it, and remnants of it did. The 1st Battalion was to protect from the southwest, and the 2nd Battalion from the north, to try to, because we knew we'd get the reserves coming up. To try to repulse. And so our 3rd Battalion commander had kept a flag that he had flown at the flagpole at the City Hall in Naples, Italy, when it fell, when they surrendered, the Germans. An Italian surrendered to our division. He kept that flag and promised before we left England that he would fly that flag over the City Hall in St. Mary Église by daylight of D-Day. And he did. He got about 180 we were scattered everywhere. It was night, a fog came in, and probably our regimental combat team probably had about as good a jump where it was supposed to be as anybody. Close to St. Mary Église, some right in top came into the town. Most of them were killed.
Where did you jump?
Well,
where did you?
That was hard for me to say because it was dark and we didn't know much. But as I
You weren't in
Look
the town.
back on it, I figured I was 2 to 3 miles
from the town.
South of St. Mary Glace, and got into St. Mary Glace with other paratroopers during the day, during D-Day morning.
Right.
After the town fell, they had a German garrison there, and then of course we were under heavy attack everywhere. But I guess that it was the fields were small, and a lot of the Germans had put up barricades and fields, posts with barbed wire. Our gliders that night took a beating. They even in the daylight the next day, gliders coming in took quite. They really ran into a lot. The fields were so small in that area.
You were under pretty much constant combat, though, for...
Yes, we were, and day and night,
days, yeah.
because they wanted to get rid of us real bad. We had mined roads, we had disrupted communications. Of course...
What kind of rifle did you carry?
I carried a M1.
M1? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They offered us the carbine with a folding stock, which our M1s were big and bulky compared to the Thompson submachine gun or the folding stock carbine. And carbine carried more ammunition. And probably had we known what kind of terrain we knew, but it was so vague, we would have more chose the carbine because of bigger clips. And M1, though it was the greatest gun, I believe, the greatest rifle.
Right.
Of course, I guess they got better ones now, but at the time it was great, and we were used to it. And a lot of us hung it over our shoulder by the strap with the muzzle down, with the muzzle tied off so we wouldn't get dirt in it, but under a parachute harness, and we jumped with it that way, and it was, once you got out of your harness, it was ready to use.
You'd take it apart and clean it a lot, would you?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
but there was a canvas bag you would design where you could take it apart and put it together in a canvas bag, but the experienced soldiers didn't want to have to put it together in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you were trained to put it together in the dark. But the fact is...
You ever get that M1 thumb?
The what?
The M1 thumb? Where you get that thumb caught in
yes,
the...
sir.
Yeah.
Get your thumb chewed up.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah, I used to hear about the M1.
You must have used one.
Well, I went to high school in San Antonio at TMI, and we had
TMI
M1.
was a great school.
Yeah, that's where I went to school, and we had M1 rifles. You know, that we never got to shoot. We just drilled with them.
Yeah.
But part of our junior ROTC training was to field dress an M1, take it apart, put it back together, and you know we do it. You know, to look into it. Part of your inspection was to open the cylinder, and your commanding officer would inspect inside there, and then we would have to do that.
Release.
Boom.
Oh,
yeah. And if you didn't do that quick enough, you got that M1 thumb. Yeah, I remember that. I got a few M1 thumbs.
Well, once you're in combat, you can just about choose anything.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I stayed with, slept with, kept and loved that M1.
Now you eventually were brought back to the beach.
We were in, I would say, almost constant combat or combat conditions.
Right.
For over 30 days. And then they brought us back. We marched we almost got over to the western shore, or pretty close. And we had real severe combat conditions. Then we marched all the way back to Utah Beach, and they had went back to England on LSTs.
Now at the beach, there were still the rather ugly remnants of the invasion were still on the beach,
yeah,
right?
still there. Stacks of personal equipment, guns, and from wounded and killed soldiers, and piled up. Going down the road, Sherman tanks that had been destroyed in the ditch. Lots of damage. Yeah, they still had barrage balloons, or they'd put up barrage balloons. I guess they had them up during that beach assault. I don't know, but
had most of the dead been removed by then, or been buried, or
yeah. Well, a barrel cruise. Well, I'm sure you could find dead somewhere.
Yeah, sure.
Because I guess you know, when people are wounded and sometimes die of wounds, they crawl off. And
yeah,
I've heard people say that. Going back, we passed barrel crews, and they, of course, have to go through a lot of things, but after they get so common, notice they were just throwing them in like cordwood. But they make, they have to do things where they got dog tags and things like that to try to have identification. But once in, they just throwing them into trucks to go to a barrel.
Yeah.
And
so you went back to England. I know you got to clean up and bathe and all of that, and then.
Oh yeah, and they gave us half the division got a week off recreation. Later in the wars, Vietnam, I heard them call it R&Rs, but they just said we had a week. We could go sightseeing, or a lot of us went up to Scotland to just see we'd heard more about Scotland, and when we came in through Scotland, we didn't see much of it, and then people went to different places they'd heard about. I had some friends that went to where Shakespeare was, and some of them went to London, and it was really a holiday. And we came back, and then the other half of the division got a week. Then they loaded us up to go into Belgium to hold bridges and crossroads. And we were in the plane, the motors were running, they called it off. The advance was going too fast. Then we went back and trained in September, went into Holland, September 17th.
You told Bill Youngkin a story, a rather horrific story about some Polish paratroopers, and one of the Polish paratroopers refused to get on the plane.
Oh, I told that story because I saw it. It was a plane next to us, and I inquired about the crowd around there. After we were deplaning, we were going to go back to camp, and someone that had been over there said, this was a Polish brigade, paratrooper brigade. They had been in England and trained in England, and had been in Normandy, and I think, no, I don't think they had. I'm vague about that, I don't know about that, but said that when they were loading, this Polish paratrooper refused to get on the plane, and his officer ordered him on the plane, and he refused, and he shot him. Shot him in the head and killed him. And it just attracted a big crowd. And it was so ironical because the mission was called off.
Right.
In other words, had he gotten on the plane, and
they'd still be alive.
He would have lived.
Right.
I don't know what caused that, whether he had a premonition. Soldiers are just like everybody. They get premonitions and have dreams. And
you ended up jumping into Holland. Talk about that, Operation Market Garden.
This was compared to the Normandy jump, and what they tell me about the jumps in Sicily and Italy, it was daylight.
Yes, sir.
And we pretty well had air supremacy. And we flew in through a tunnel of protective aircraft, British and American, and they were zapping everything along the way that was shooting up, ground fire. And the jumps were in open fields, and very little injuries, very few people under fire at the actual landings, airborne landings. Then we were able to take our first objectives pretty early, bridges. We were trying to hold bridges. And it looked like a piece of cake, but then we just had constant, terrible counterattacks that lasted the whole time. Our division's main objective was a bridge at Nijmegen.
Yes,
the 101st main objective. We had little bridges in between. I had a huge bridge at Eindhoven, and then the British was trying to bridge at Arnhem. But I later read about how much they had a lot of snafus, a lot of things that didn't work. The radios didn't work. They had misjudged the German strength and the defenses, and they just about got wiped out. And
so it was eventually called off.
Was called off. We went back into North France, and we're in North France when the December 19th battle they called later the Bulge, the Ardennes battle.
Right.
Yeah, and that was really bad. Both us and the 101st were in North France, in the general area of Reims, and got word. We were pretty well restricted to the bases. When we first got down there, they gave passes into town, but too much drinking and difficulties, they clamped down on everybody and you couldn't get off. But we were like most people, were either watching movies or playing cards or writing home or something. They called officers out all over. They were passing word, and then they called non-coms, and then they told everybody get back to your. Our outfit was in a French artillery post, masonry barracks, and really nice facilities that the Germans had occupied. It was near a little town called Sweeps. They called Sweeps the Marne, or Sweeps on the Marne River, and where the Battle of the Marne took place in World War I. And I got to tell you something about 82nd. It was an infantry division in World War I. It was named the All-American Division because they had soldiers from every state. They found out, so they gave it that name.
All-American, yeah.
And it was a division that Sergeant York was in, and who became famous. And he was sort of our soldier to emulate, and they always held up for us, very proud of his killed and captured more Germans than any group in World War I.
Yeah. Was the 82nd always stationed in Fort Bragg, or did that come later on?
They were down in Louisiana when it was decided to make them airborne. They were still an infantry division. The commander was General Bradley,
right? Omar,
who later became one of the big generals.
Yeah, right.
And they decided to make it airborne, mainly of the efforts of who later became our end-of-war General James Gavin. He was an advocate and an early airborne soldier, and he was, we thought, the greatest paratrooper and general in World War II, because those of us that knew him and served under him, he was a real general. He had set up his division headquarters but he never stayed there. He was out, and you would see him in every firefight. And he was a general that knew how to move his regiments and battalions. He didn't make mistakes. He went and he carried an M1 rifle. He jumped out of the first plane, the first man out, after the Pathfinders had went in, and greatly admired and loved by every soldier that ever knew him. James M. Gavin. Yeah.
And I know you said that he was when the ground invasion of Japan was being prepared, that he said that.
Yeah, he got the division
he jumped into
together.
Tokyo.
That was after Germany surrendered, and
right.
And here's some men that had been there since Louisiana and been all the way through. And he said, I want to volunteer us to jump on Tokyo. Tokyo would probably be the greatest defended place in Japan. And that would be kind of suicide mission, but he said, he was an inspiring, great leader. He said, every trooper that will jump with me on Tokyo, take one step forward. Well, I'll swear everybody did.
Yeah.
And then they wondered, why did I do that? But they didn't. He offered that, but we got sent to Berlin. Early occupation.
Right.
Yeah.
The Battle of the Bulge, going back to that's probably known as much for the horrible weather as it was for the battle itself. It was just
we heard it was the worst weather they'd had in a century.
You were fighting with frostbite and
terrible,
keeping your feet
healthy
and
just
everything.
Trying to keep your feet from freezing and your fingers from freezing. It was a big job. We really didn't have that kind of clothing, and that.
You weren't prepared for it.
We our combat uniforms were pretty good. They were heavyweight, but my gosh, you're talking about sub-zero weather times, and we had things like thaws would come, and there'd be a melting, and then a freeze, and they'd run vehicles on that stuff, and artillery shells would ricochet off that ice, and like airburst and stuff like that. It was quite a sight. And then you'd have another warm spell, and we lost our wire jeep laying telephone lines, and 4 veteran soldiers were killed. The jeep fell through a soft place and hit a mine, and destroyed the whole jeep and killed four paratroopers.
You talked about later after a German army had surrendered to you, German 21st had surrendered to you, an encounter with the Russians and a Russian tank that you weren't sure what it had in mind.
21st German Army Group surrendered to our division, and I was a T4 sergeant.
Yes, sir.
And I was assigned to be a bodyguard to the officer that was being sent out to meet the Russians. And we had a Jeep driver, and we went in a Jeep. Well, the German army had surrendered. They still had their weapons. Their 88 artillery was in them play. Were still. I just thought we'd gonna be wiped out any minute, until pretty soon we just kept going. In the meantime, there were, as far as you were seeing, soldiers and civilians, and were carrying and walking, bicycling, anything they could get, were trying to get behind us, away from the Russians, who they knew were just annihilating everybody they could get their hands on. And so we just kept going. 24 miles into what had been our line was this was north of the Elbe, south of Hanover, into Germany. We had crossed the Elbe several days, 2 or 3 4, I can't remember, after they had first met down south. And we were, the lieutenant was assigned to meet, I think he was, can't remember. He wasn't one of my officers. He was an officer sent out at division headquarters. But they gave me the job, so I kept my N1, which is just the safety on.
Right.
But I never fired it the whole time we were on that trip. And we got as far as a place called Ludwig's Lust. And we were to meet there in the city square. It's a pretty good sized town, German town. And it was deserted. And we stayed there, and later on we heard we assumed we were too far for our tank, the Russian tank coming. We heard it rumbling and coming. And it was getting closer, and it came around the street that bordered the squares, like our squares, you know, around courthouses with businesses and things all around. And he just knocked the corner of a business off. We heard a machine gun shooting, and this was a German man running. He just stayed there too long. And they just cut him in two with their machine gun. And then they came on around and headed straight for us with that, I don't know what their millimeter gun was, but it kept getting bigger. And got up there, and they braked it, and that old tank rocked. And this is in my memory, the hatch threw open, and this Russian stuck his head out, and he threw his hands up, and he says, "Dine Risky is here!" And they started piling out of that tank, bringing vodka. Mm-hmm. And this captain, what was this? I didn't know his name. He had American whiskey they had sent with him. Yeah. And we shot our, this must have happened everywhere they met Russians. I read about it. And they want to shoot your small arms, and they shoot their small arms. And, oh, they hugged and kissed you. Mm-hmm. Every one of them hugged and kissed the three of us repeatedly. Of course, a lot of Europeans do that, and we were used to seeing it and knowing about it. We got kissed in Normandy and in Holland, too.
Well, the Russians were as happy that the war was being won and was ending as anybody, because they lost more. They lost more than we did. I mean, overall, the Russians, they lost so many in World War II.
The Russian vengeance was because of the way that Germany was a scorched earth policy going into Russia, and they were just so. We just heard so many stories of how cruel they were in retaliation.
Yes, sir.
And
so you came home, I think, Christmas of '45. Is that right?
Yeah, in New York. We went through a terrible storm in the North Atlantic. The captain said the worst storm he'd been in 50 years on the oceans.
So you thought you'd fought this war and you were gonna die coming home, huh?
First noticed we had high seas, and we go to eat in the dining room or galley, and things would start sliding. Pretty soon, I think by supper time, everything was sliding off the table, and everybody was sliding off the benches and going down to the bulkhead, and everything in the galley, all the pots and pans were falling off, and so then they ordered all hatches closed, and no one on the danger of being shot should open a hatch. Mm-hmm. They had gotten enough warnings, I guess. We were on an American cruiser, Philadelphia, and Reno had turned and gone back, but our captain determined to go ahead. And those props would come out of the water, and that whole ship would just shake, and then we later heard we had reached the critical role, and where you can capsize. And what the most shocking thing was, after we got disembarked, they marched us around. We could see the bow, and those big steel plates had been busted right in. Wow. And they looked like they'd tried to prop them up with timbers, and I guess they had to use pumps to. And we were. They told us we were dead in the water. Well, now that's bad, when I guess when your engines aren't working. And so we didn't know all that, and they didn't tell us all that at the time. I still have a mimeograph, ship's paper, where it told us a good bit about the crossing, and it was pretty hairy. Yes. And but we didn't lose anybody, and nobody injured. That captain was something else to bring us home. We got to New York City on Christmas Day.
Christmas Day of 45.
1945. And
you came back to A&M and you finished school?
Yeah, I got discharged New Year's Day from Fort Sam Houston. Came back on trains, and I wasn't going back to A&M. I wanted to get a better job, I thought, and I had friends that had already gotten out on points earlier, that had gone down and worked in refineries. They had good plans and good salaries, but my wife's father's on the school board, and he was trying to get servicemen to use their GI Bill and become teachers, because they just had lost all the teachers to war jobs or military service, or they had died, and classrooms were like 45 and 50, and it just needed teachers real bad. So I got talked into going back. I went back and finished and got a teacher's certificate. Went over to Somerville, where he was on the school board, and where I was raised, more or less. And he had kept saying, well, you owe something to this community. You need to do something. And so he had to get off the board, because I was married to his daughter, and nepotism.
So you taught over at Somerville? You taught at Somerville?
Yes, I taught physics and chemistry and math in the grade school for 3 years there, and then I was offered a job down in Wharton County in a rural high school. There was a lady from Somerville who was married to the superintendent down there, and they'd come up and visit. Her mother was our dietitian in the Somerville cafeteria, and I got to know them, and he offered me a high school principal's job and half teaching down at that at a place called Louise in Wharton County.
Right.
Then I later went to El Campo, where I was offered a job as a junior high and coordinator of 5 rural schools and 2 elementary schools in town, and it paid good, and I took it. And then I came to Bryan because my father died, and I wanted to get closer to my mother, and got a job as assistant principal at high school. And then they made me head principal over Stephen F. Austin. We had a 8th and 9th grade school over there then.
Right.
It was a large school, and I stayed there till I retired.
When was that?
I had 37 years, but my mother had bought my retirement time in the military. You could buy what you would have paid into the retirement system. And so she gave that to me. So I had 40 years on retirement, and when Dr. Summers retired, a whole bunch of principals went out with him that was eligible. And that was good, because Dr. Gordon got to put his almost everywhere. All the older principals went out with Dr.
So when did you retire from
85.
SFA in 85?
Then I got talked into being bailiff in the College Station City Court by Phil Banks, who is an attorney here, but he was city judge then.
Right.
And I didn't want to, I retired, I didn't want any job, I didn't want to do anything. He talked me into it, and I worked out there 14 years under Phil Banks, and then Steve Smith, and then Randy Michelle, and then Trip Walter.
Right.
Was the last. Great judges, really.
Yeah.
Outstanding. Well, Steve Smith and Randy Michelle
they're still
judges.
Yeah.
And it was really an interesting job, and primarily because the minor offenses, parking and speeding and underage drinking and loud music are done by the Aggies, and so we really had an educated crowd. I really enjoyed it. But they went to full time. I started as 2 afternoons under Phil Banks, and I had a good bit of time. But then when Trip Walter came in as a full-time judge, and I was working from 8 to 5, and then we had night court. And my wife had some heart trouble, so I retired after 14 years with a College Station. But I really, it was a joy. It was a joyful job. It just got too much. I couldn't, I wanted to be with my wife more because I wanted to be able for her to live as long as I could help her live as long as I have.
What's your wife's name?
Her name is Joanna. She goes by J.O. Joe. And
how long have y'all been married?
We'll be married in December, 59 years. We got married the day after Christmas. And it's not a good day to celebrate an anniversary because you had all the celebrations you can handle at Christmas, you know.
Right.
And we hardly ever went out. Her mother worked in the bank in Somerville and secretly left money to her family, and my wife kept hers and let it draw interest. At our 50th anniversary, she took her and myself and our 3 daughters and 2 grandchildren to Hawaii. And we spent a week on Waikiki Beach.
Wonderful.
And the son-in-law, we just had one son-in-law, but he is a person that likes peace and quiet. He stayed home. He said he had more fun than.
So you all have how many children?
We have 3 daughters. 3 daughters. Three daughters there when they were little. And the oldest daughter lives in Austin and was the only one that married and has a son that went to UT. I tried to make an Aggie out of him, but he was raised in Austin in a little band. And he's 25, and the granddaughter's 20, and he's 24, and she's in New York going to Fordham University and wants to study law. And then the next daughter finally became a minister, but she worked at A&M. She became a teacher and taught at Richardson High School in Dallas, and then when A&M raised the requirement on English, she got a job as teaching English out here at A&M, and then became an assistant to Dr. Coltis in Student Affairs.
Right.
And then she wanted to become a minister in the Methodist Church, and against all our advice, she went to the seminary in Dallas, and then stayed over, and she has a PhD from A&M though, which she got over a long period of time working there. I think she had a great career ahead of her at A&M, and now she is in Dallas in a large church, independent church. She's out near Love Field. Then the youngest girl became a musician. She became a symphony musician, played in San Antonio Symphony, National Symphony of Mexico, Omaha Symphony, and then came back to San Antonio, and then went to Salt Lake City Symphony.
Wow.
And
how many grandchildren do you have?
The what?
How many grandchildren?
Just the two. The oldest girl. The other two girls were engaged, but I think had too much career desires and never married. They, and I think they're old maids now. I just ramble.
No, you did. This was wonderful, and it's going to be a wonderful story to tell. The problem is that we never have enough time to tell the whole story, and what we'll do tomorrow is pretty much have a conversation just like we've had now. We'll have to move along a little bit quicker.
Maybe you could lead it a little bit better, because I hate to be...
No, I'll lead you in.
I'm a kind of verbal person, and I got that way from being a teacher, I think, because...
No, I'll lead you into what we want to talk about, and then when we need to move on, it'll flow real well, and I'll just move you on. And
most combat soldiers won't talk, and I wouldn't at first. But after I became a teacher and realized that people should know, and of course you can't tell them. You have a little tiny picture, but and I wasn't ever very good at telling about all the killing and wounding and things like that. I'll tell you one thing, I don't even really enjoy the movies. That Band of Brothers was so realistic.
Yes.
And Finding Private Ryan and The Longest Day and all that. I did watch it, but I was deeply disturbed for a day or two, and especially in my dreams.
Right.
Because if the movies cannot reproduce the sound, or you couldn't stand in the movie theater. They couldn't reproduce the odors, because you couldn't stand in the movie theater, and all the horrible things and all the terrible fears you can't even explain. But they come close enough to any combat soldier is disturbed. And I don't know many that can bear to watch it.
To get into the specifics of it. Yeah, sure. And that's not what...
You lose friends, and the whole thing is that you're so close to each other. I had a close friend in that Jeep that was destroyed up in the Ardennes when it fell through the ice. We had been together. However, he was an old, early veteran. But my closest friend that I'd been through early training and parachute school and a lot with was killed in Normandy. That I just didn't understand God letting him die.
Yes, sir.
And kind of lost my primitive faith. I had a vision back in England. After his name was George Eichler, and he's from California. He was such a good soldier. He's a corporal. He's just the best good Samaritan I'd ever known. Loved everybody, helped everybody, and we were we had a forward observation team that had been under fire and lost the radio, and our Sergeant John Capehart came and said to Corporal, said, tell one of your men that I want to take this radio up to this hill, a number of the hills. And he said, no, I'll take it, John. He said, no, you send one of your privates. And so, no, he insisted. Well, the Jeep driver we got Jeeps, you know, as soon as we could, and trucks and everything else. But Louis Barbarino was his Jeep driver. He's the one that later got killed in the Ardennes when that Jeep fell through. But they got the radio, and he took him down to this point. He said, well, now, George, we got to go down here low, and then we're going to get in the creek, and we're going to go up that hill. There was a French wall. They built their walls and barns out of rock masonry, and so road had been, they'd blown the trees, they put sticks, explosive around when they were retreating and blow across the road, and so they couldn't drive any farther. So Louis said, George, let's go down and we'll stay behind this wall, get down. That's the way I came back. And or the way they told him to go, I can't remember that now. And so George insisted they go around the other side of the wall. And when Louis got back, he said all at once he saw George leap in the air. And he immediately, just out of combat animal instinct, fell flat on his back. Well, they depressed their machine. They were using what we call a machine pistol. It's the most rapid fire gun we'd ever heard of. I didn't know the name. But they had shot the tip off his helmet, the tip off his nose. He had bullets in his jacket that had gone through his jacket, shot the tops off his boots. But they couldn't depress it enough to kill him. And he wiggled out of that place and got in that Jeep and came back. And told our captain and all what happened. And he came to us. Well, we just went off running to attack the Germans. They had left. And I guess I was the first one to get to George. And he was on his back. There were 4 bullet holes about that size right in his chest. Of course, he bled out his mouth. And I just cursed God. And it really, really was something I'm so ashamed of. But you have strange feelings like that.
Sure. Sure.
And I just missed him a whole lot. And after we got back in England, I was on guard duty one night. I never had forgotten him. And I looked over, and then we had a little moonlight. And there he was standing there in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
But I swear I thought I saw him.
Wow.
And my nickname was Lou. I said, George. He said, Lou, everything's all right. I said, I went toward him, and it was a vision. He wasn't there. I think somehow in my mind that sort of relieved my...
Gave you closure.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
And then I could think more rationally. But I'm not the first one that blamed God for...
No, of course not.
Letting people...
Right.
You know, I think people that lose babies sometimes... I had a couple one time, a beautiful couple, Christian, active in the church. They wanted a child. They finally got a child. The child died in infancy, and they wouldn't go back to church. They wouldn't. They were totally washed up until later. Mm-hmm. They came back, and then they had other children.
Right.
And I guess things just happen to you. But soldiers are prepared. George got killed about, I think it was like about November 16th. I did have it down, or 18th or somewhere of June. See, we went in June 6th. We had others killed, close friends too. So it was just that we had a close bond, personal, and I guess that's the way it does. But I'm not the only one that's felt that way. I don't think it. The soldiers that lose the close friends, it bothers them, you know.
Yes, sir.
Just as it would lose a wife, lose a child, lose a... were you in the military?
No, sir.
You did ROTC?
Yes, sir.
Oh, well, you know.
Yes, sir.
The other thing, I don't know. But later on, you could, I didn't know this, but after the war, our division put out a book where everybody in the division, that they could trace where they were killed, what outfit, what was the circumstances, died of wounds or killed, or was it an accident or whatever it was, and where they were buried, and then later on if their body was brought back home. And I didn't really know they did that in World War II. I knew they did it in Vietnam.
Right.
They brought them home to be buried, didn't they?
Right. Yes. Yeah. My mother's first husband was killed in World War II, and he initially was buried in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Because that's where he was killed during a training mission.
Yeah.
In Hawaii, and he was buried there until after the war was over. As a matter of fact, he was killed. He was killed and buried in 1944, and they did not bring his body home to be buried in Austin until 1948, 4 years later.
Well, I think in George's case it was later too. You know, several years after the war when they get around to doing all that.
Right. Matter of fact, my mother had already remarried my father. Okay. Her first husband had been killed in the war in 1944, and then 2 or 3 years later, she remarried the man who was my dad, and my mother was actually pregnant with me when she went to the final burial of her first husband.
Well, awesome.
She always admired my dad because she had 2 other children by her first husband, the one that was killed.
But he was open and loving to her to understand.
Oh yeah. As a matter of fact, he babysat her 2 kids who had become his kids by now.
Yeah.
He babysat her 2 kids while she went to bury her first husband.
He was a great man.
He was a great man. He really was. Man. He was very understanding of all of that. So because it was 4 years later that they brought him back to bury him in Austin, and it was amazing. Well, let me tell you what we're going to do tomorrow, and it's very simple and it's very easy. Do you know where the KAMU studios are? Do you know where
it's up near the foundation, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's on Houston Street.
Yeah.
Right there. You just turn in right there by the foundation on Houston Street, and it's the 1-story building right there on the left.
Yeah.
It's the KAMU.
I've been there.
Right.
Yeah.
You can just park in the back. There's a driveway right after the KAMU building, and you can just drive in there and you can park in the back. There's parking places that say 24-hour parking only. Well, you can park there, back behind the building. And if you could be there around 1:15 tomorrow, that'll be good.
Yeah, I can be there
around 1:15. And you can wear whatever you want to wear. Whatever you I don't know if you have, are you a member of VFW or anything like that? Or I don't know if you have any.
Yes, but I don't think any of those, I don't know. I did.
You can wear anything that you wish.
I'll just wear, I'm known here more the way I was a principal here a long time. I might just wear my uniform, which was suit and a tie.
That's fine. That's absolutely fine. And you and I will.
I think this picture. You had a picture of the one that Bill did. I think didn't I wear a suit? Yeah.
Oh, that was your. Oh, right here. And just a shirt and a tie. You can do that. That's fine.
Yeah.
And we'll just.
I don't know.
We'll just be sitting in 2 chairs and just talking to each other, just like we're doing now. There'll just be cameras shooting at us, and and it'll take about, once we start going, we go straight through, and it'll take about 30 minutes. What I want to do is I want to take these pictures with me, and I'll give them back to you tomorrow. Do you have any other pictures? Anything else?
No, I was a private. They didn't let privates have in the war.
Well, this is fine. We can talk more, but I'll take these and we'll show these on the.
I'm just trying to think if I had any more, and I don't think.
Well, don't worry about that. That's fine. That's fine. Those are nice shots.
You can kind of guide this thing. I have a tendency to talk too much.
Well, I won't let you do that because we got to finish it.
You got a timeline.
Yeah, we got to finish it in 30 minutes. So we're going to move along a little quicker than we did today.
Yeah.
But we'll still tell the story, and we'll be able to tell a lot because we don't have many pictures to look at. and it'll be good. We just don't need to get bogged down into a lot of detail. You know, I want to. So,
I was determined to tell a little bit about World War II after the 50th anniversary of D-Day, because I felt like that it was good to remember. And I found out the Russian schools teach World War II at every grade level, because it was such a big, narrow, they almost got wiped out, you know.
Right.
And then they came back. This year, well, 2 years ago, I went to Milan School, and I borrowed a paratrooper combat jumpsuit and explained it all to little children. In World War II, very few of the American paratroopers had ever been up in an airplane because of the Depression and things like that.
Right.
There weren't many airplanes.
They had no reason to fly.
Those little kindergarten and first grade kids, almost all of them have been up with their families, going places and doing things.
Right.
So I had a lot of explaining to do. Then the teacher got me to come back this year. I borrowed a World War II paratrooper jumpsuit from Brent Mullins.
Right. I know Brent.
Brent's got an arsenal.
Oh, I know. I've been out to his place.
Yeah.
Isn't that an amazing place? The things that
Well,
he
I
has.
got to know Brent when I first moved here.
He's got that Higgins boat out in his yard.
Oh yeah, he's got now a museum.
Well, I know he's trying
And
to.
he's hoping
He's got a museum in his backyard, and he's trying to. He's trying to build a museum.
He's building a museum a little farther back.
Right, exactly.
And
I know Brent very well.
his daddy had a cafe, and his daddy was a B-17. I don't know if he was a tail gunner or belly gunner, but he was. Bert Mullins had a cafe at Sunnyland Center down there, across from where that eating place is, where you can eat all you want, you know.
Yeah, and he just died not too long ago.
Recently, they were. Bill Youngkin wanted to interview him, and I said, "Why don't you interview some Iraqi veterans and then more recent veterans, Desert Storm and Vietnam?" He said, "We're going to get to them. We're trying to get to World War II before they all die off."
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He was in Vietnam.
Yes, sir.
He was a paratrooper.
Yeah, he been on my show. I had him on. I had him on my show to talk about not only his service, but to talk about the newspaper series that he's doing too. So he's been at it for about a year. And
I had a jumpsuit.
Right.
And Brent in high school, when I was assistant principal up there, his daddy got into more than me. I got to eat breakfast there because I went to work and did my paperwork early in the office. And so he told Brent, and Brent started collecting World War II memorabilia. So he asked me if I had a paratrooper jumpsuit, and I said, yeah. He said, I want to buy it. So I said, well, I'll give it to you. No, I want to buy it. How much you want for it? So I said, $10. The darn things now are selling for $500 to $1,000.
Yeah.
So I went out there to visit. He had an open house one time. Had people, these collectors from everywhere. His daddy told me, and we went out there. And I went in his office, and he had this mannequin with a jumpsuit on. And I said, yay, you got a... He said, that's not yours. That's not yours. I think it's a new one. Because I took it off that mannequin and the boots and all and wore it 2 years ago. And then I did it again. And then I went out to the Brazos Christian School and did it for their whole kindergarten through grade 12. And did a little type program for it. I bring out two things. And this is what I saw. I saw more prayers and more praise in World War II than I saw profanity.
Yes, sir.
I saw more people turning to God and asking for help and praising God than I saw cursing God, or using that type of profanity. And I try to bring it in, and I try to tell children, learn to pray. Learn to pray from your mother. the little children, and then all the big kids, learn to pray for everything. Because then, that's what I saw in World War II. These soldiers had the habit. They had been going to church. They had been praying in the home. Their daddies had been reading the Bible in the home. They turned to God out of habit. And some died, some were wounded, some were saved. But it was a thing that I saw and observed. And I got 1,000 stories about how it was a natural reflex.
Yes, sir.
And it's one of the greatest things that there is. So that's what I get into those little talks.
You bet.
We did.
You bet. Well, I'm going to let you go. You said you had something at 11 o'clock.
I've abused you.
No, you haven't. No, I'm going to let you go. I got to